This is Right to Life Radio with John Gerardi on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400, a production of Right to Life of Central California. And now, here's your host, John Gerardi.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Right to Life Radio right here on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400, a production, as always, of Right to Life of Central California, RTLCC.org. This is John Gerardi, the host of Right to Life Radio, director at Right to Life of Central California. I'm joined by one of our wonderful sidewalk advocates here at Right to Life of Central California, Linda Talia. Welcome back to the show, Linda.
Thanks again. I love it.
Yeah. So what we're going to start, we've had Linda on several times in the past. It's sort of sporadically and irregularly doing a segment called Stories from the Sidewalk, where basically Linda, along with George Aguayo, who's another one of our employees at Right to Life, Linda and George go out to our outreach center, which is right next door to the Planned Parenthood Clinic on Fulton Street in Fresno. And they interact with women and couples who are going into and out of the Planned Parenthood Clinic on Fulton Street. And we've occasionally done Stories from the Sidewalk where we have Linda share experiences that they have out there. But we want to do this on a more regular and consistent basis. So every first Saturday of the month, we are going to do a Stories from the Sidewalk segment. And then it's on the calendar, and you, our dear listeners, will know to look out for it. So I want to start, first of all, 40 Days for Life is coming up. And so we want to sort of give people some encouragement to come out. And you had a really cool story about ways in which you have an impact that you don't even know about. So why don't you share this story? I thought this was really, really cool about your encounter with law enforcement, but a good encounter with law enforcement. Yes.
Yes. Let's clarify that.
Yeah. Not
I don't want to have a bad name.
Not on the bad side of the law. So
I'm
take it
never
away.
on the bad side.
There you go.
So some of our days get long after a while. I mean, we're not always well received.
Sure.
I mean, a lot because, we're nice.
Sure.
But there was a law enforcement car driving through, and I just happened to, as always, make a little conversation. Hey, how's it going? And he just, kind of shouted out his car, thanks for being out here. That's pretty brave.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, well, that was a good one. And he said, I have a story.
Well, there you go.
And I'm like, oh, I like stories.
Yeah. Now we're not trying to give away the officer's name, right? So
we're not.
We won't say if it's sheriff or police or anything. But it was very nice of him to tell us, and I think it's really cool. So
yeah,
take it away.
I kind of felt like he wanted to put it out there too because they're good stories and we need them.
Yeah.
So he, I had to tell him to pull out of the driveway because we're not allowed to stand in the driveway.
Yeah, sure.
And so he pulled over and he proceeded to tell me his story and how when he was 16 and his girlfriend was also 16, that she got pregnant and they chose life.
Oh, wow.
His dad was like, okay, man up. And he did. And so, and they're still married.
And they're still married. Holy smokes. Whoa,
so think about that. He was 16 years old. He wasn't working. I mean, he might have been working, but he sure wasn't a law enforcement.
Flipping burgers at McDonald's.
Maybe he was pulling weeds. I don't know.
Yeah.
But so if you look at that whole picture, he not only did they figure out how to do a relationship, which isn't easy at any stage,
let alone when you're
high
16.
school.
Yeah.
And he figured out how to go to school and go to work.
Right.
So that was encouraging for me because I always like to have a little story to pull out of my back pocket when someone's saying, well, I'm not going to be able to go to school or I'm going to, she's going to not do this. Well, yes, you can.
Yeah.
And here's somebody who did.
Right. Well, and that's the constant refrain is that, I mean, none of us are in favor of teen pregnancy. It's not a great idea. It's not a great plan. But the notion that the treating it as a death sentence and the treating of raising a child as if this is, it's such an unempowering message. It's like all of society is trying to tell rightly trying to tell teenagers, yes, you can, try hard, achieve your dreams,
Yeah.
follow through, work hard, accomplish your goals.
Yeah, but if you get
Except here.
pregnant-
But if you get pregnant, you're done.
You
Like,
can't even,
like-
it's like you can't walk. When did that happen?
Right. Well, maybe for like a week there at the end. But,
Yeah, that's
but
true.
but this notion that no, you can't do it, and that's one of the awesome things about being within this movement is that you do get to meet lots of stories of people who can be genuinely inspiring because they did choose life and they basically say, okay, yeah, we had this challenge, we had that challenge, we had this challenge, and through the support of our community, through the support of family, through the support of friends, we're able to overcome those challenges. And I mean, that's
I think
kinda
that's something
a
we
huge
want
part of the ministry.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
go for it.
Well, I think that's something we need to put out into the community is that we need to get behind that.
Right.
We're going to have teen pregnancy. Unfortunately, it's going to happen.
Sure.
So the next step is to not make those people who are in that situation feel condemned or like, okay, your life's over. In fact, one of my favorite signs that we have at the building is she can have her dreams and her baby too.
Right.
I mean, most people don't put those things together.
Sure.
And
and even like with the one of our friends with Fresno State Students for Life, one of the girls who's most, I should say girls, one of the young ladies who's most active in the group was herself in that exact same position. So she
Hey, I was in
became
that
pregnant.
position.
Yeah, and as were you. Yeah, exactly.
And look at me. I'm
yeah,
like
there
really successful and
There you go. you're on radio. Yeah.
I mean, I walk the streets. Oh wait.
Yeah, you walk the streets doing good things. not like other streetwalkers. Anyway,
Who would want to be me?
yeah, but so one of the young ladies with Fresno State Students for Life, got pregnant as a high schooler and continued and persevered and worked really hard at it. And her boyfriend was super supportive and her family was supportive. And she's I think she's like pursuing her master's degree at Fresno State in speech pathology stuff. And she's friends with our friend Bernadette Tazy. And so, there are so many examples of that. And that's one of the coolest things about the Outreach Center is that it's not, for us, it's not just,
It is our
hey,
way
don't go have an abortion. It's trying to help people once if they make that choice and choose to continue to work with us, to help them along to continue to make those choices.
I mean, I call that empowering women. If
Yeah.
we're going to throw that little phrase around that, everyone seems to be throwing around,
Yeah.
let's actually empower women and men.
Yeah.
I mean, the men, it's part of the equation. So they need to know, hey,
Takes two to tango.
Yeah, it's not going to ruin your life either
Yeah,
unless you let
exactly.
it.
Well,
So
sure, exactly.
This guy was a perfect example.
Yeah, and that's and again, I understand the impetus of, yes, having a kid
Yeah.
when you are 16 and unmarried is not the ideal scenario. But there's so much good that can still be brought out of a non-ideal situation depending on the attitude with which you approach the problem, the attitude that you project to young people. I mean, that's even one of the I forget how psychologists talk about this, but it's this notion of telling kids, well, you're not an athlete, or telling them you're not or for kids to have the attitude of, well, I'm not really an athlete.
I get where you're going.
I'm not good at math. My identity is I'm not good at math.
Yes.
Well, your identity is not necessarily a static reality. If you and to apply labels to yourself, like I'm a person who's not good at math, I'm a person who is not good at science, I'm a person who's not good at drawing. Now, you might not be Michelangelo or anything, but anybody who really puts in the time and the energy and the effort to work at these things can really genuinely improve. And we do and not to start giving a psychology lesson on Right to Life Radio, but this
tangent coming on there.
Yeah. I'm like becoming a motivational speaker.
That's John's brain keeping going.
Yeah. But we project these messages to young people of, oh, you can't keep going to school and having a baby.
Right.
You're not the kind of person who
that's
could do that.
Planned Parenthood's whole motive. I think motive was the wrong word, but that's their marketing.
That's their marketing.
You know, you can't become a real woman if you have a baby when you don't want to.
Which is awkward messaging since it's kind of a kind of an integral part of womanhood is the ability to have children. Anyway,
Right.
but yeah, that is a huge part of their advertising and messaging.
So we're believing that.
Right.
Oh, I couldn't do that, and it's so humiliating. It shouldn't be.
Yeah.
It's life.
Yeah.
You know?
Life is messy, and life throws you curveballs, and how you respond to it that sort of defines that will sort of ultimately in the long run define you, as we saw with this police officer.
Yeah.
And there's so many people, whom I've met in our work. I mean, I've even talked with a couple of pastors pastors from different Protestant churches locally who've worked with us on different projects, who tell me about, when I was 17, my girlfriend got pregnant, and they didn't make that choice.
Right.
And they stood on the sideline and didn't do it.
Yeah.
Because they either, in the case of these men, they believe, well, it's sort of up to her, or because they believe, well, I couldn't possibly raise that kid. I couldn't possibly provide for that kid. I'm just 16. This would derail my chances to get a scholarship, to do this, to do that. And, these adult,
and
mature
are they
men.
regretful?
And these adult, mature men who every year around that day remember and they have this regret that they carry with them.
Yes.
And for these two men in particular that I'm thinking of who, and they have found some kind of forgiveness and healing and turned to God for some kind of comfort in that. But they know that it's still a regret that they're carrying with them for the rest of their life. And that's a source of regret that it's not that you can't recover from it. Again, that doesn't necessarily have to define you.
No.
But it's a source of regret that, that police officer doesn't necessarily have.
Exactly.
So it's
and I have heard the same stories that you're talking about, not even from the same people, but frequently men will come, especially it seems to be like around their 60s. It's like maybe they have extra time or something and they're starting to think.
You're retiring and you have time
reflecting.
to reflect.
Or even if they haven't gone there, they'll talk about, I'll be when I was younger, I'll be reading a story to the kids and I'll picture
one more.
All the time.
Yeah.
And it's the men who seems to think about that, or maybe it's just they're finally talking about it.
Sure. Which is actually one of the nice things about our Rachel's Vineyard ministry, and one of the things that Patty Lametti, who coordinates it for us, who sort of talks with us about it, obviously without giving away anything confidential, but she does acknowledge the fact that it's a surprising number of men. Like it's more than you'd think. And maybe it just shouldn't be surprising. I think the culture has been so suffused with the notion that abortion is just a women's issue. Abortion is just a women's issue. Abortion is just a women's issue. How dare you as a man have any opinion about this, blah, 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 blah. But this does really profoundly impact a lot of men. And it's a lot of men who have, maybe they thought they had some say, but they thought they needed to just be supportive no matter what, or they were fed some lie about this, or maybe they were totally left out of the decision altogether. And that's for too many of them, that's, they buy into there's a lot of convenience to the lie that it's just a women's issue.
Yes.
I feel like there's a lot of men for whom
they're like, okay,
it's your it's your decision. I wash my hands of it.
I can't tell you what to do. I'll tell you all the other times, but not this time.
Exactly. And then, before it gets into, even more sinister forms of it. I'm really glad you heard that story. Now, 40 Days for Life is coming up, folks. It starts Wednesday, February 17th. If you want to participate with us, one of the things we're doing, we're trying to manage the way that we have our volunteers come out. So if you want to participate, get in touch with us. info@rtlcc.org, or you can directly contact George Aguayo, who's managing this, george@rtlcc.org. We want to get groups together so that they can come at different times throughout the week, different shifts throughout the week, and then you can be out there with George and or Linda to sort of help coordinate your guys' activity, keep everyone spread out and COVID safe and stuff like that. So anyway, Linda, thanks so much for being on. And again, we'll be doing this every first Saturday of the month. Stories from the Sidewalk with Linda.
I look forward to it.
Okay, great. All right, when we come back, Jonathan Keller should be joining us if he comes to the station on time. And we'll be talking about a lot of stuff in pro-life news and politics, some of the bad stuff that President Biden has initiated. Stay tuned. You're not going to want to miss it. Right to Life Radio, right here on Power Talk 96.7 AM 1400, a production of Right to Life of Central California, rtlcc.org. Right to Life Radio. John Gerardi. And joining us, Jonathan Keller, rolling into the studio.
Just in time.
Just in time for this segment, though late for the start of the show, but that's okay. That's okay.
Some people, John, if you're a logistics expert, you do just-in-time manufacturing. We do just-in-time radio.
There you go. All right. Good job, Jonathan. Way to have a snappy comeback. My younger brother, cadet at the United States Military Academy, at West Point, Joseph Gerardi, has received his orders from the United States Army. He will be stationed near Jonathan Keller's family's ancestral stomping grounds.
Relatively ancestral.
Relatively near. My little brother is going to be stationed in Fort Riley, Kansas.
That's
so
right.
Congratulations to soon to be whatever he's going to be, first lieutenant, I guess, whatever the entry level officer position is in the Army. Congratulations to my little brother Joe.
Yeah.
And going to Kansas near Jonathan's old stomping ground.
Thanks,
All right.
Thanks for his service.
Yes, indeed. I mean, pretty much his service has constituted going to college for 4 years and being on
watching a lot of
being on the Army golf team and doing a bunch of push-ups. But he's going to actually start doing service now.
It's good.
So,
It's good service.
Yeah.
So
he's going to be driving tanks.
Hey.
So there you go. All right. In this segment, relatively shorter segment, we wanted to talk a little bit about the Mexico City policy, which Joe Biden has now enacted. Joe Biden has signed the Mexico City policy into place, and he has signed in place his policy, which is to repeal the Mexico City policy. Let me specify that. He has repealed the Mexico City policy. Now, the Mexico City policy was a policy that Republican presidents put in place that basically cuts off federal funding for abortion overseas. And Joe Biden has rescinded this. So following the example of Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Joe Biden says, yes, we are going to spend a bunch of foreign aid money on abortions overseas. So that's what's going on here, basically. And I wanted to talk a little bit about a lot of these countries where this money is going are poor countries in the third world. In the developing world. A lot of them are in Africa, and a lot of them are formal colonial holdings of the various European powers. And I think
it seems totally natural, John, very, very benevolent and gracious that these wealthy European countries would grant abortion to them.
Yes.
They would bequeath it as you too can kill your children.
Yeah, well, the notion that this is what constitutes charity, that helping poor women in Africa to abort their children. And it leads me to this question. There's a lot of stuff, without commenting one way or another whether this is right or wrong. I'd say today people are a lot more racially sensitive than they used to be. I get a little nervous around the use of the word thug, for example. Sure. A lot of people have sort of raised the argument that word is often used in a coded racial way around African-American men. There are lots of other... The way that... The verbiage that we use to talk about race has changed a lot just since I've been an adult. I'm 33 now, and the way we talk about race when I started as a freshman in college, I think is a good bit different than it is now over the course of the last 15 or so years. And it's amazing the kinds and some of it almost borders on the notion that, well, what you're saying is offensive. It offends certain people. It's coded language where a lot of people might innocently use the word thug and have absolutely no desire to indicate anything racial about it, no hidden racial motive. Amazing to me how literally funding abortions in certain countries and in certain communities in the United States, and being totally okay with a practice that results in a quarter of all African-American pregnancies being terminated, that is apparently has no racial edge to it.
And John, that's a quarter of all African-American pregnancies in general, but in some areas, like we saw several years ago, in New York City, for a period of time,
It was like more than half.
Yeah,
wasn't
like
it?
51%.
Right.
Of all pregnancies among African American women ended in abortion, which is just staggering to think about.
And the way that the intersectional left sort of tries to talk about it, it's as if, well, this is, we're giving these women freedom, we're giving these women options, and it's empowering to communities of color to have these rights. They need and they'll even frame it as they need these rights more than other communities.
Yeah.
That's as if that isn't a super racist thing to say.
Yes.
So let's think a little bit. If you're going to say using a phrase like thug is racist, and I'm not saying that it hasn't been used in a racist way before. I can see the argument. Let's not kid ourselves and act like a practice that results in the extermination of 1/4 of all African American pregnancies doesn't have any sort of racial edge to it whatsoever. All right, when we return, we're going to talk about religious liberty and whether religious liberty is enough. That's next. Elton John with us today on Right to Life Radio. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Jonathan Keller here with us.
Happy to be here.
All right. I want to talk about kind of a very important piece published in the Wall Street Journal by Ryan Anderson. Ryan Anderson, who was with the Heritage Foundation for a long time. He's now the director of the Ethics and Public Policy Center and big conservative think tank out of D.C. I've known Ryan for 15 years or so because he was a graduate student at Notre Dame when I was an undergraduate.
I was going to say, Did you know him very well when you were...
Not very well, but I know him, and we know each other enough to say hi. Anyway.
So he got his BA from Princeton, and then his...
I think he got his poli-sci doctorate from Notre Dame.
Yeah.
So anyway, Ryan Anderson is a really significant figure in American public life, in part because he literally wrote the book on gay marriage, on why, in his opinion, gay marriage is wrong, and wrong is a question of public policy. So he wrote the book on that. He wrote the book on transgenderism, why transgenderism is not something we should promote as a public policy initiative. He's also super pro-life. And he wrote a piece that was published in the Wall Street Journal on how religious liberty isn't enough. Now, a lot of arguments and a lot of fights that happen on the national, political, and judicial scene that surround abortion, they're not actually about abortion per se. They're actually about religious liberty. They're about the religious liberty of pro-life people to not have to participate in abortion in some way, shape, or form. All right? If you look at the arguments about the HHS mandate from the Obama administration, that was about the religious liberty rights of various kinds of employers to not have to pay for insurance coverage for abortion.
And John, just on that note, someone like Bart Stupak who was one of the only reasons that we had
That Obamacare passed.
yes, it was the only reason it passed, but he was also the only reason that it didn't pass with a full-blown, just, wholesale abortion funding.
Mm-hmm.
His claim to fame in that situation, well, I'm a pro-life Democrat. And God bless him. I know we have some real sincere pro-life Democrats.
Right.
That, like our friend Teresa.
Yeah, being any kind of pro-life Democrat is very, very difficult, especially if you're actually elected.
And God bless those brave souls who try to travail in the vineyards. But in Bart Stupak's case, it wasn't arguing the first principle of abortion is inherently wrong, intrinsically wrong, because it kills an innocent human being.
Right.
It was, okay, let's set aside all of the morality issues of abortion because I know I'm never going to win that. I'm not going to be popular. But maybe, do you think, please, sir, could I just not pay for it?
Yeah, let's not force religious people to pay for it. Like, we're fine with having it be legal. Have the federal government pay for it all you want.
And
but just don't make an individual who's Catholic or Christian or whatever, or in any way ethically opposed, don't make that individual pay for it.
And hey, President Obama, if you want to have plans that do cover abortion, I mean, if you want to even provide free abortions, that's fine. Just don't make me be morally complicit by actually directly having to pay for it.
Right. And we can kind of see the inherent weakness of that argument. It's like you're basically giving up the most important fight, which is basically abortion is right or wrong.
Right.
Should we fund abortion or not? Should we force people to pay for abortion at all? And basically what you're wanting is, let us just live like the Amish. Let us just have our little isolated or like on a Native American reservation or something.
Yes,
Let us have our little, Catholic or evangelical reservation.
Oh, the reservation angle is a almost scary way to think of it. But
yeah.
I fear that is almost what a lot of
the Catholic reservation sounds a little more fun, I'll be honest. There's probably a lot more. There's probably
more alcohol.
Probably more alcohol.
That's for sure.
Yeah. Sorry, Jonathan.
More gambling too.
Hey, there you
right.
go. There you go.
There's a Baptist reservation, you couldn't even dance. So that'd be horrible.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. That's like the Simpsons thing where they talk about, oh, here's Protestant heaven. Oh, thank you, Nigel. Let's continue. Let's play. It's people like playing croquet.
Yeah.
And then Catholic heaven is like a bunch of Mexicans having a fiesta. And then the Irish like punching each other and beating each other up.
Perfect.
Anyway, so Ryan Anderson is, I don't know how we got to that point.
Come for the pro-life discussion, stay for the rampant racist heaven talk.
The digressions. Anyway, so Ryan Anderson, writing in the Wall Street Journal, makes the point that religious liberty isn't enough. And here's what he has to say. President Biden's pledge to heal and unify seems to mean giving the far left everything it demands in the culture wars. Conservatives therefore must resist. Yet in doing so, we must avoid the trap of framing every debate as if it were about religious liberty. Religious liberty is important, but it's only part of the story. As the Biden administration advances a divisive and extreme social agenda, our response can't simply be a polite request to be left alone. We need to oppose the left's agenda on the merits. It's the principled thing to do, and it would be good politics given where the American people actually are on the issues. Take Mr. Biden's decision to overturn the Mexico City policy and call for repeal of the Hyde Amendment. Those policies long prevented taxpayers from funding, and thus being complicit in, elective abortions overseas and at home. Mexico City policy applies to overseas abortions. Hyde Amendment applies to abortions domestically through stuff like the Medicaid program. But protecting pro-life people's right to dissent isn't the most important reason to oppose abortion funding. The complicity matters because killing unborn babies is profoundly unjust. Conservatives' refusal to fund abortions communicates that message, which is why the left has turned against popular consensus to oppose the Hyde Amendment, including Mr. Biden, who caved to pressure after supporting Hyde for 40 years. That was a very big moment in the 2019-2020 Democratic primaries when Joe Biden flipped his position on the Hyde Amendment, a position he had held for 40 years, saying, no, the federal government shouldn't fund abortions, to now saying, yes, they should.
Yes.
Or consider Mr. Biden's approach to gender ideology. Transgender equality is the civil rights issue of our time. All right, he continues talking about gender ideology stuff. Conservatives have no choice but to push back. And here, too, the terrain to defend is not primarily about religious liberty or religion at all. Children feeling discomfort with their bodies shouldn't be told the lie that they are, quote, trapped in the wrong body, nor should adults pump them full of puberty-blocking drugs and cross-sex hormones, etc. So the left would love to frame these issues as if they pitted reason and science against superstition. This is a great point.
Yep.
This is a great point. Because what happens if you're saying, well, okay, do whatever you want to do, just let us have an exception.
That's right.
What do? Then you're basically making yourself into the Amish. You're basically making yourself into, what's the religious group that opposes blood transfusions? Jehovah's Witnesses?
Jehovah's Witnesses,
yeah, okay.
or Christian Science.
Yeah. So if you're saying, well, just let us alone, that we don't have to. Okay. You can take the profoundly unscientific and ludicrous position that blood transfusions are, for some reason, evil.
Right.
We will continue living according to science. Similarly, if we try to stake out a religious liberty claim rather than fight on the merits of the issue, what we're saying that then the appropriate response, if we act as though we don't have science on our side, as if we don't have the truth on our side, as if we don't have the truth of human nature and human ethics on our side, then basically the response is what you hear all the time in the California legislature, which is, listen, I understand that people have very serious and strongly held beliefs on this issue, but this question is about choice.
Yes.
And we're not forcing anyone to have abortions.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, while you may have this viewpoint, you don't have to get an abortion. So therefore,
you need to realize that you cannot impose your religious dogmas on your fellow Californians, because after all, we follow the science. And John, let me, if I can, I want to pick up and read a little bit. This is the thing that was so powerful. Ryan goes on. He says, but on all these issues, social conservatives are on the side of biological facts.
Right.
The Democratic Party and the left are the science deniers. To be sure, Christians believe the historical religious teachings on these issues are anything but superstitious. The scientific point of view confirms biblical teaching about gender and yada, yada, yada. Likewise, although Christians believe all people are made in God's image, it requires no faith to see that an unborn child is a child.
Right.
Even atheists post ultrasound images of their kids. When they, So that is so key, John, because it does not require you to be a doctrinaire Catholic or evangelical.
Sure. Well, and that's the thing. So when the John Kennedys of the world, and not so much the John Kennedys, but his successors, the Mario Cuomo, Ted Kennedy, John Biden, John Kerry, Joe Biden,
Nancy Pelosi.
When they come after and say, listen, my faith teaches that abortion is wrong, but I'm not going to pose my sectarian viewpoints on the entire rest of the country. I need to do what's in the national interest, not necessarily what my religious viewpoint is. They're basically acting as though the Catholic position against abortion is basically this private revelation that's restricted to this one group of people, that you guys can't have abortions.
Right.
As if it's, analogous to Jewish dietary restrictions.
Yes.
Or something. The Jewish people don't, I don't think the Jewish people necessarily, I might be wrong. I don't have a deep experience.
To our Jewish listeners,
if there are any
we
Jewish
apologize.
listeners,
Please email us if we're making a mistake.
I deeply apologize, and please inform me if I've made a mistake. But from what I understand about modern Jewish praxis and how, for example, on the Sabbath, they would some Jewish, very Orthodox Jewish families would have a Gentile friend do certain kinds of household tasks for them as an assist to assist them in certain ways, because they were certain kinds of physical labor that they did not think they could do, that they believe that they are not supposed to do on the Sabbath due to the prohibition of labor on the Sabbath.
Yes.
So
they and I've heard, because I went to Israel in 2019.
Okay.
And there was an example where a lot of Jewish families will make sure that in the bathroom, for example, on Friday before sundown, you'll leave the light on in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Because
you're not supposed to turn on the light.
Turning on the light, in their view, is it's essentially akin to kindling a fire.
Right. But for them, it's not. It's a commandment for their discrete group,
Yeah.
it's not necessarily immoral for a Gentile
To go correct
to do what he wants on a Saturday.
Correct.
Right. So, and again, I might be completely butchering the viewpoints of Judaism, and I realize Judaism is also not a monolith, and there are probably lots of different versions of Judaism and different viewpoints, even within Orthodox Judaism. So I apologize if I got any of that wrong. Anyway, regardless, that is what the left analogizes. What the pro-choice side analogizes our beliefs about abortion to. That this is the weird, peculiar viewpoint of your little religious sect, like the Jehovah's Witnesses who don't want to do blood transfusions, like the Amish who don't want to wear zippers, like, this, that, and the other thing. And what we're saying is that, no, this isn't like that, or like, I don't know, Catholics not eating meat on Fridays in Lent.
Sure.
This is what we believe to be, and based in science, what we strongly argue to be universally true of humans.
It's a difference, John, as an example, and I know we can probably pick this up in the next segment, but it's great that McDonald's on their daily, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, like once I met more Catholic friends and I started going to different fast food places, I realized, oh, McDonald's daily special every Friday is the Filet-O-Fish sandwich.
Exactly.
I'm like, why would they pick Friday for the day that they serve fish?
Well, there you go.
Or why is it that it just so happens to coincide with sometime around the 40 days prior to Easter, there's all these fish specials on fast food menus?
Exactly.
It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But our Catholic friends, my Catholic friends, they're not demanding that everybody else can only eat fish.
Right.
It's an option.
And what we don't want is for people to think that our opposition to abortion is the equivalent of Catholics abstaining from fish on Fridays. We have to defend this as something more. We'll dig into this concept a little bit more after the break. You're listening to Right to Life Radio on Power Talk 96.7 AM 1400 and the iHeartRadio app. CCR with us today on Right to Life Radio. Thank you all so much for listening.
John, can I admit something that maybe I'm a little ashamed to admit?
Go for it.
But
it's
maybe
okay.
I'm not,
No one's listening. Don't worry about it. It's not like this is on the radio.
maybe I'm not the only one, though. Maybe I'm not the only one.
Maybe.
Does anybody else out there, if you just close your eyes and you're not as familiar with the song, you just hear the first couple bars, does anybody else confuse John Fogerty from CCR with Little Richard?
Well, he's clearly just doing a Little Richard impression.
Okay.
I mean,
I'm just
yeah,
sure.
You could do that.
I listened. I'm like,
Other than one's a white guy from San Francisco and the
Well-
other is an African-American gentleman from St. Louis, Missouri, I think. Anyway, but yeah.
I mean, they both have great voices.
Sure.
They're great singers.
Yeah.
But I
Well,
just,
yeah, and
I was
Fogerty-
listening to that. I'm like, oh, it's Slip. No, wait.
Well,
no,
I
no.
kind of did I kind of did the same thing. But yeah.
Okay. All right. I feel. I don't feel totally dumb.
Also, let's not kid ourselves. John Fogerty is kind of doing a big Little Richard
An homage.
impersonation. Yeah, of course.
There you
of course. Yeah. All right. Right to Life Radio. We want to acknowledge new members of our 300 Club. The 300 Club is the awesome club of supporters of Right to Life Central California. If you give us $25 a month, that amounts to $300 a year. It's not hard. That is a huge help. If everyone listening to this show gave Right to Life $25 a month, we basically would not need to do any more fundraising. So if you want us to never have to fundraise again, go to rtlcc.org, click that little 300 Club button that's at the top there, and for $25 a month, you can support all the work we do at Right to Life between our radio education, our education for schools, education, our outreach center that Linda was talking about earlier in the show, all of that stuff. rtlcc.org. I want to thank some of our new signups: Juana Lara, David and Christine Bolt, Ron and Roberta Giannini, not exactly new supporters of Right to Life. They've only been supporting Right to Life for 50 years or something.
I think that's about
something
right.
like that. Gaston Signetti, Lou and Sharon Tellefson, and Randy and Christine Hardcastle. Thank you all so much for your support of our wonderful organization. All right. So, Jonathan, as we wrap up the show, I think this piece by Ryan Anderson about religious liberty.
I would commend it to all of our listeners.
Yes.
Religious liberty isn't enough. It's at the Wall Street Journal.
Right.
If you run into a paywall, just Google the title of it. Sometimes you can sneak around and you can still read it. But,
Yeah.
And if you can't read it there, I think he did end up publishing it back at the Ethics and Public Policy Center website.
Okay. So eppc.org. Maybe you can find it there.
Yeah.
So the general point of what Ryan Anderson's trying to say is that we need to fight these issues on the merits. We can't just fight them from the perspective of, we can't just fight these issues from the perspective of, hey, leave us alone. Let us, don't involve us in abortion. Let us be free to follow our consciences. Let us be free to do our thing. Now, I will say, in certain political jurisdictions, maybe not at the federal government level, but for example, in the state of California, that might be the only argument we have left. And the only thing we can possibly argue is, hey, at least let us alone to do what we want conscientiously. But the point Ryan's making, I think you can see what has happened in California, because in California, the defense of the core issue surrounding abortion, namely that abortion itself is wrong.
Yep.
It's not a question of you shouldn't force us to pay for it. That's a secondary issue. You shouldn't force us to pay for it. You shouldn't force us to be involved in it. You shouldn't force us to have to violate our consciences. The core issue is that abortion is bad. And that's what we have to fight for. That's what we have to defend. Now, the Republican Party in California basically decided to run with the brilliant electoral tactic of what is the least popular, if you divide everything, all of politics into an x-axis and a y-axis with fiscally liberal, fiscally conservative on both ends of the x-axis, socially liberal, socially conservative on both ends of the y-axis. Basically, the most unpopular quadrant is the one that the California Republican Party banked everything on, which was the notion of being socially liberal and fiscally conservative, which are two wildly unpopular positions. So, way to go, California Republican Party. And that's what happened, is that by continuing to make the argument of, well, let's just not fund abortion, let's not force people to be involved in it, we gave up the fight. And now, guess what? Now we're being forced to fund abortion. Now we're being forced to pay for abortion in insurance plans. So because you give up the central fight, you wind up even losing the whole religious liberty angle of it as well. All right, folks, that is going to do it for us today, as Frank Sinatra will play us out at the end of the show. Thank you all so much. This has been Right to Life Radio on Power Talk. We'll see you next week.